Hey guys, Scripted here with another video, and this is a good one because this is really an indictment of Disney Star Wars in a major way. And it was something a lot of us talked about so many times when Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm and Disney decided to try and make Star Wars girl-centric. And again, that's not to say you can't have female characters, there always has been, but the focal point has been trying to draw in the female audience. And that's, I mean, if you can get away with that, you can do that. I get it. It's, you know, if you've maxed out your male audience and you're trying to get more money and you're trying to grow even bigger, now what are you trying to do? Well, you're trying to get other audiences. It's not just girls. It's people that are part of the LGBTQ. They tried all this stuff to bring in all these new people that they assumed were not fans, and they assumed they could make them fans by doing different things that maybe the traditional Star Wars fan or the male Star Wars fan wouldn't have wanted. We don't need to go into every detail about all those things. I mean, I think we can fairly deduce it on our own, right? Things like some of the stuff in the Acolyte, certainly the way that Rey was handled, certainly the fact they made a transgender stormtrooper. What are you doing that for? Well, you're trying to draw in that group of people because you're trying to grow the brand. But the brand was already really big and it was kind of unnecessary. So, but this is cool because I actually checked the timeline of some stuff for this to make it, it's actually more interesting than people think. So Ron Howard shared a pivotal piece. So Ron Howard directed Solo. He wasn't the original director, but he came in to save it because it was a mess. And apparently the guy who was playing Solo, I can't remember his name, the actor, was really struggling. And they had to constantly be working on him to get him to act like Han Solo. And that's not knocking him. I mean, he's the previous director. Maybe he just couldn't handle it. But Ron Howard came in. And he said and George Lucas said to Ron Howard as he was preparing to helm Solo a Star Wars story, he said, "Howard, just don't forget it's for 12-year-old boys." Now, this is really interesting because when you look at, he did that interview with Charlie Rose. Remember the one where he said, like, the white slavers and look what I've done. I sold my company to these, I sold my babies, he said, to these guys.
Let me just talk about the upcoming Star Wars, The Force Awakens. They were your kids.
Yeah, well, they are right. You know, I loved them. I created them. I sold them to the white slavers that take these things and
Okay, but
That interview came out in December 25th, 2015. But that's when The Force Awakens came out, right? Force Awakens came out, December 19th or something, 2015, like right around there. And then right after the movie is released, this interview drops. So the interview, they dropped the interview, PBS dropped the interview less than a week after The Force Awakens comes out. So we don't know when necessarily it was filmed. I was trying to look that up. I couldn't find it, but you have to assume it was filmed sometime fairly recent before that, a week or so before that. Certainly Lucas would know what was in The Force Awakens, even if he hadn't seen it when this interview was filmed. And he was upset. He was very upset, and he clearly didn't like what they did. It was very clear. This is not negotiable or debatable. It's very obvious he was not happy. That's just from the one movie. From the one movie that Disney had made up to that point on Star Wars. And then he says he says all those things he says in that interview with Charlie Rose. And then, like a year later, January 2017 is when Solo started filming. So I don't know if it was like a year and a half later, but whatever, sometime between, 6 months to or sometime between 12 and 18 months after that, he's telling Ron Howard, because Howard came in after they started filming, obviously, that, don't forget it's for 12-year-old boys. But Solo has some of that stuff in it with the droid and everything, the stuff we were talking about earlier. So you're kind of like, that didn't really go so well either. I don't think that droid was really for boys. for boys my son's age. They wouldn't even really get it. Like all those scenes with Lando and the droid were really weird. So they didn't even really go down that road and take his advice fully either. But I mean, when you guys really think about it, like this headline kind of says it all. Someone should tell Disney. And I want to hear from you guys. Like this kind of just solidifies everything in just this one line for 12-year-old boys. Just kind of solidifies everything and encompasses everything over the last 10 years that's been such a huge problem. Not everything, I should say. Some of the lore-breaking stuff doesn't really have anything to do with that, but just the whole feel of Star Wars and what they've done with it and how they thought they were going to change it and it was going to work and it was going to be this huge profitable thing if they completely change it from what George Lucas wanted. And I'm not saying I'm a huge fan of every single thing George Lucas does or that, you know, you have to completely follow everything that he says necessarily. I mean, you bought it, it's yours now, you can kind of do what you want. But at the very least, this sort of basic premise of this should be at the forefront of what you're doing. And that indicts Andor. Andor is not for little kids or for 12-year-old boys. It's just not. We all know that. And I would say neither is The Acolyte. The Acolyte's not for 12-year-old boys at all. You know, some of the other stuff, Skeleton Crew, you can make the argument, sure, all that stuff. The other thing I want to say, too, is you know, stuff that's made for 12-year-old boys, like the original trilogy, is also appealing to men. It just is. We like that type of stuff. We like our nerdiness and our nerdy stuff. And so it would be appealing to men as well if it's appealing to 12-year-old boys. It kind of brings you back. The other thing that's interesting about this, too, is we had this whole talk about Underworld and how George Lucas had 60 scripts for this show that was more of an adult show. So that kind of muddies the water a little bit, too, in the sense that what's he saying? Is he saying that the films are for 12-year-old boys, but you can do shows that aren't, so that therefore Andor isn't an issue? So it's a little bit muddied. Now, mind you, he never made that show, and maybe he never would, and so maybe that was just a fun thing on the side that he was doing. But that kind of brings out a little bit of issue, too, and it's sort of likened to most things that George Lucas says, where there's seems to be a contradictory thing about it from him. Because if it's for 12-year-old boys, why did you write 60 scripts and you're going to make this crazy show that was all like dark and not really for 12-year-old boys? Or was it? How bad does it get? That's a question. I don't know. But either way, Disney went the complete opposite route and tried to bring in, I guess, 12-year-old girls, teenage girls. And then they tried to bring in, you know, minority groups within the LGBTQ. Which, you know what, a lot of gay people liked Star Wars already. They didn't need gay people in it to like it, by the way. That's the other thing that's kind of weird. I don't need to see myself in everything. Right? Like, that's super weird. But, and they don't either. Most of them don't either. It's just this, so they really missed the boat. This was really stupid, and now here we are 10 years in, and here's George Lucas, or here's Ron Howard saying what George Lucas told him. He didn't fulfill that, as I said earlier, with the droid and some of the stupidity in that movie. However, that mattered to George, and I think it mattered to him because he had either seen or knew what they had done in The Force Awakens and went, what are you thinking? What are you guys thinking? And that is amazing when you think about it, because all that was just this Mary Sue Ray character and Han Solo being a bum and Leia and him being estranged, and that's his advice to Ron Howard. Make sure you don't forget this, because they did in their movie. That's what it feels like to me. You guys let me know in the comment section if you like this content. Please like, subscribe, always helps the channel. Feel free to check out anything else on my channel. Have yourselves a really good day.